Hi there, business owner. Do you want a better understanding of business finance, what your numbers actually mean, and stories of the highs and lows of business, where I'll be sharing my tips and tricks every week? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Hello and welcome to another episode of the 3Bs podcast. As always, I'm your host Stephanie, and this week's episode of the podcast is slightly different to what I'd originally had planned. So originally this week's episode was going to be about marketing, following on from last week's episode number 27. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's all about awards and why you should enter them as a business owner and the benefits to you and your business. But because this week had International Mental Health Day and I really want to be authentic and honest with you, I felt that this was a much better topic to cover: mindset and mental health. I have struggled quite a lot with my own mental health for the last few weeks, particularly. Anyone that finds me on social media will know that I was not particularly well. I was quite poorly over the summer, and trying to run a business, do this podcast, whilst being ill and looking after two children in the summer it took a big toll on my mental health. And only probably this week, I've started to feel like the light at the end of the tunnel's there, that I'm starting to feel back to normal. And it was very easy for me to not tell you, not post it on social media. But I think honesty and integrity are both personal values that are very important to me and our core business values. And I think it's only fair that I share the highs and the lows. And the lows of business ownership can often be a toll on your mental health. And I really hope you take something from this week's episode. It's a little different to normal episodes, but please know that you are not alone and the world is a better place because you're in it. If you are listening to this podcast, you're making my world a better place. I love making these for you to listen to. So enjoy the episode, and I really hope you take something away from it this week. So being a business owner and business ownership is no mean feat. It's no easy road, and it can often be very lonely at times, I feel. Specifically if your partner, for example, is in full-time employment or is not in business ownership or entrepreneurship. They don't always understand why you're stressing at 8 p.m. on a Sunday evening about the next day's work, or why you're still working well into the evening. And it's difficult, and I've had many a conversation with my fiance about it, and it's been ABCS UK, my company, will be 2 years old in November, and only now I think he's starting to understand that me doing the work the night before in the evening, although it's not ideal and my boundaries are that I try not to, sometimes for my own mental health, so that I can sleep better, eat better, and have a more productive day on the Monday, it is much better for me to do an hour's work on a Sunday evening. And that's okay. And he'll help with the children, and he'll make life a little bit easier for me, or he'll do the dinner, or do the household chores. And I think if you're a business owner who doesn't have a partner as understanding as I do, it can be even more isolating. And I think I just want people to know that it's okay if you feel lonely, and reach out. And I think we all feel like we're in this on our own. We all feel like the struggles we're having as business owners are individual. And I've had client meetings for most of this week and last week, and almost every single client I've spoken to is feeling the same right now. Things are tough. The cost of living and financially people are starting to struggle, or they're starting to be concerned because Christmas is coming and they're starting to think about affording that, and what time will they need to take out of their business, and what they will need to, maybe they need to invest in more staff. Maybe they are seasonal businesses. So you think of all the events businesses, the Santa's Grottos, the light trails, all those sorts of things. They're looking to start hiring now to fill those vacancies, to provide those services in December. And financially, if you're not strong if your finances are not strong and you don't understand them well enough, then you can worry that if you're going to be able to afford everything. And especially if you are investing up front. So for things like the grottos, I guess the rental of the space in the shopping centre or the garden centre or wherever it's going to be, plus the wages, like you can predict those costs, but you can't necessarily predict, well, you can't guarantee, you can predict, but you cannot guarantee the amount of people who are going to actually purchase that service, how many people are actually going to turn up. And there's so many unknowns there that would absolutely cause stress and anxiety for a lot of business owners. But if you do not already, please find a business group or a network or people that are in your industry that you can collaborate with, or people that are in your area, other business owners who you can talk to and speak to and help alleviate some of those stress and those anxieties. It may be that your business is not seasonal and you can use trends and use data to predict what's going to happen in the next couple of months and start to put plans in place. That's where bookkeepers are really great and can offer such value to a business. That's where we can sit down with you and say, okay, so at this point last year, you were here. Looking at the trends, you've only increased in revenue across the last 11 months, so we're expecting your income to be approximately here. Or, okay, August was a very quiet month for you last year. You had a 27% reduction in turnover. So let's scale back some of the overheads in August, look at maybe better terms with suppliers. So instead of 30 days, you could potentially go to 60 days, or you could negotiate paying people at a different time. You could negotiate reducing staff or wages for that month. There's many things you can do financially to help alleviate mental health. And obviously that's where I am the expert. That's my area of speciality. But I think you need to have the community. I think you need to have other business owners that you can talk to without fear of judgment, without fear of anyone thinking of you in any particular way. And having those open and honest conversations will hopefully help your mental health from not dipping as low as it could potentially do if you're on your own. I think that's really important to remember. Maybe as you're listening to this podcast, you are feeling particularly low and are not sure how to get back to where you were or to get back to the highs that we do often experience in business ownership and entrepreneurship. And I think for me, mindset is huge. And the word mindset is thrown around a lot nowadays. But your mindset is basically how you think. It's trying to stop those negative thoughts and turn them into positives. Glass half full instead of glass half empty. One thing that really helps me is I'm a catastrophizer. So I am the person who will immediately think of the worst outcome with any situation. So, for example, I did my first live webinar with the guys at Pulse this week, and I was really anxious. I'd never done it live before. I record these podcasts every week. Sometimes I record them live with guests, so it's not like I can stop and add and edit sections out. But the thought of going live on a webinar really, really made me anxious. And because I'm a catastrophizer, I immediately went to the worst case scenario in my head. What is the worst thing that could happen? In fact, James asked me, he said, how are you feeling? I was like, I'm a little bit anxious. And he said, why? What's the worst that can happen? And I was like, in my head at the time, I couldn't think of anything. I was like, well, I could swear. Like that's not the worst thing in the world. Me using a swear word is not the worst thing in the world. But at the time, I was catastrophizing in my head that it was all going to go wrong, and I would say something stupid, or I wouldn't know the answer to the question they would ask me. And that's the sort of catastrophizing that I do. And I've worked really hard in the last couple of years on my mindset of going to that place of, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Because that happens to me a lot. And then I go to what's the best thing that could happen here? And it was the best thing that could have happened was it could have gone really smoothly. It could have been great exposure for myself and my business. And it could really help the guys at Pulse because they have a fantastic product. And actually, it went in the middle. Like, it wasn't perfect, and I did feel like I stumbled on my words a couple of times, and I feel like I missed things I should have said, which I think happens every time I get off any sort of meeting or phone call. My brain goes, oh, you should have said this, and I don't. But I also had the adrenaline of, you've done it. Like, I've done it. It's live. It's done. The first one is always not going to be great. And that's something that a client of mine taught me. The first one you do is always going to be rubbish, whether that's your first time riding a bike, whether that's your first time swimming, whether that's your first time speaking on a stage in front of people, whether it's your first time pricing your services. The first time is never going to be great. I mean, if it is, amazing. But 9 times out of 10, the first time is not going to be great. That's what got me through my first spin class a few weeks ago. Like, the first one is going to be rubbish, but we're going to get better. The next time we do it, it will be better. The next time we do it, we will make the changes that we need to improve it, and it will be better. So if I can impart any wisdom this week, it is, remember that the first time is always going to be a bit rubbish, or most likely going to be a bit rubbish, and that's okay. And secondly, build a community, find other business owners. You're always welcome to come and talk to me on social media. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads. You can drop me an email. You can do voice recording on the podcast. So if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, you could actually leave me a voice memo and I can hear it back and I can get in touch with you that way. Just don't sit and suffer in silence. Just know that, I think I said it at the beginning of the episode, the world is a better place because you're in it, and sometimes it really doesn't feel that way. But if you're listening to this podcast, whether it's on the day it's released or years from now, please know that by pressing play and listening to me rabble on for 15 minutes about something I'm incredibly passionate about has absolutely made my day. I love seeing the analytics, and I love getting messages from people saying, oh, podcast is good. Podcast is good. I really like this week's episode. A lovely lady said that she listened to last week's episode while she was mowing the lawn, or cutting the grass, depending on how you use that word. I'm a northerner down south. I try to do it both ways to appease everybody. But that was lovely. And that, again, made my absolute day, that I could share some of my knowledge and my experiences and my expertise as a business owner and as a bookkeeper and accountant, and help somebody else on their business journey. That's all I do this for. So I really hope this week has been useful for you. And that brings us to the end of another week of the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening to it, so that I can reach more business owners and help them build better businesses. See you next week for the next episode.